And welcome. Today we're going to be taking apart a Razer Blade RZ09 0288 series laptop. This is the 0288 7E92 with the 8th gen i7 and GeForce RTX 2070 video card. Alright, so to begin we're going to need a small Torx bit. This is a T5 to remove the bottom case. And just be advised, we're going to be leaving the display assembly complete. We're not taking apart the display. So we'll go ahead and flip it over. And we're just going to be removing these Torx head screws around the perimeter of the case. Alright, now that we have those bottom case screws out, we should be able to lift this lid off pretty easy. And in this case, it just kind of comes straight off. This laptop had been opened before. I could tell by the wear on the screws, so if you do have catches that are kind of around the perimeter, you should be able to just work your way around and just pop those up to remove the bottom case. But I don't think this one has any. I think it was just basically held on with screws. Alright, so got inside the laptop, and it looks like now we're going to switch to a small Phillips bit. I'm going to go to a 2.5. And that looks like it will allow us to remove pretty much the rest of the components inside the laptop. Alright, so I guess first we're going to remove the battery, and it looks like the connector is just a simple pop-up type, so we'll go ahead and remove the screws and then remove the connector. Alright, and once you have the screws out, you should be able to kind of verify that the battery wiggles free, which it does, and the connector, we're just going to pop straight up and off with our fingernail there. So with just a little bit of wiggling, we can remove the battery from the case. It's a pretty unique battery. It's just a huge rectangle. Alright, now that we have the battery removed, we're going to go ahead and remove the SSD drive. So it looks like it's just one Phillips screw. And then we can pull it straight out of the slot, and this is an NVMe 2280 sized SSD. Alright, so I guess next we'll go ahead and remove those RAM sticks, and they have buried one underneath the video cable. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect the video cable. And on this type of retainer, there's a small metal bar. They just kind of pop up like that, and see if that's glued down. No, it's not. So you can either get your fingers on that bar and pull back, or just, gently pull back on that ribbon. These connectors tend to slide out really easy, but definitely remember to flip that bar up and off of the end of that connector. Alright, so we'll take out that RAM stick. We're just going to spread those little retainers, and once that stick pops up, we'll pull it out. And same with the other side. This is PC4 2666 megahertz. Alright, so looks like we can go ahead and remove the Wi-Fi card now, and then we'll go and do the fans and heatsink. So for the Wi-Fi card, we'll just pull up on those antennas and remove the single screw holding the Wi-Fi card. Let's go ahead and work these. And just wait till we get the fan out. All right, so this big little covered unit here is the heatsink. So it looks like they have some of the little foam tabs sitting on top of the screws. We'll go ahead and remove those. And we're going to need to remove these ribbons from the top of the heatsink to remove it. So we'll go ahead and flip up the connector for the smaller ribbon here and pull that out of the connector. And then I'll have to peel the tape back that is holding the ribbons to the heatsink. And just be real careful at the very end, because you don't want the last piece of tape to give and you accidentally rip the ribbons. Alright, so I'm going to first try to remove the fan by itself. It's always nice if you can replace your cooling fans independent of the heatsink. So go ahead and just dig this little connector out. If you can get your fingernail in there, it makes it a lot easier. It's just they don't give you a whole lot to grip on those connectors, so it definitely helps to have fingernails, or you can use a small tool. And we'll go ahead and remove the screws. Alright, there we go. There's the fan. So it does look like they allow you to remove the fans independently, which is always a nice thing. Alright, and then we'll repeat for the other side. Just dig our fingernail into that connector, kind of pull it out of there, and remove the screws. Alright, so for the heatsink, we're going to go ahead and just loosen or remove the, looks like the 8 screws holding in the heatsink. Yeah, these are definitely removable. So as far as removal is concerned, it doesn't matter which order you remove them, but when you tighten the heatsink down, you definitely want to work in kind of a zigzag pattern. You don't want to start on one side and then just tighten it down, you know, from one side to the other. If this is a one-piece heatsink, I would start from the middle and work your way out. Since there's so many screws, I do these 4 first, and then the 4 on the ends. So that way it'll kind of tighten the middle down first and then spread the pressure as you tighten the outer screws. It looks like there's one little tiny one right here as well, also a Phillips. And once you get the screws out, we'll just need to gently wiggle that heatsink. It looks like they do have looks like the little bar here does extend from the heatsink, so there's also a couple screws on the outside. The very, very far end of the heatsink on either side. Okay. So especially when a laptop starts aging a little bit, or if it's been used a lot, the thermal paste will tend to dry out and harden. So I found the best way to dislodge the heatsink that's kind of glued in with thermal paste is just to wiggle it back and forth while applying upward pressure. And it might take a little while, but you should be able to unstick it from the motherboard. Okay, so I think we got it worked loose, and we'll just finish pulling it out the rest of the way, and you can see, there we go, see just how much thermal paste they have on this thing. Okay, so you have a ton of little thermal pads, and you have the 2 spots of thermal paste. So this heatsink is definitely glued down pretty well. So after you get those screws out, it might take you a few minutes, but just gently keep wiggling it with upward pressure, and you should overcome the adhesive properties of these thermal pads and thermal paste. But that's a lot. All right, so looks like the only other thing to remove here is the speakers, and then we can start removing the motherboard. So this is also a simple slide out type connector. Just get your fingernail on one of those tabs, and then you can remove the screws. I will say the screen assembly, it's really hard to tell if you can actually remove it without removing the motherboard first. The screen assembly ribbons do go through the back vent of the palm rest here, so you may be able to take these hinges out and just slide that ribbon through, but removing the motherboard is going to make that looks like a lot easier. So just keep that in mind. As long as you can get this ribbon through the little part in the vent and remove those hinge screws, you might not have to remove all this stuff if you're just replacing your screen assembly. But we'll go through the steps for that just in a few minutes once we get this motherboard out. So what we'll do now is finish removing all of the ribbons that are connected to the motherboard. And most of these connectors are just a flip up type. So you flip them up and then remove the ribbon and flip it back down. And some of them are on the back side. The part that you flip up and down can be on the back side of the connector or the front, but it'll usually be the smaller bit, and you'll see where it kind of swivels up. Alright, so looks like we've got the visible ribbons, so we're going to go ahead and remove the motherboard screws. Alright, on the back side, it looks like they have used a smaller Phillips. So I'm going to switch to a 1.5 for these 2 screws that are on the very back end of the motherboard. Alright. So looks like we got all the screws out, so now we'll just give the motherboard a light wiggle, and if it moves freely, it means you've gotten all the screws out. So we'll just gently lift up on it and gently turn it over, just to make sure there's no ribbons on the back side, which there are not. And we have now removed the motherboard. Alright, so we are pretty much ready to remove the screen assembly from the palm rest assembly. And just a quick rundown of the individual components. It looks like the touchpad is held in by some really small screws. These are probably a 1.0 or a 1.5. And the keyboard, it looks like it's removable with very, very, very small Phillips screws. Those are 1.0 or smaller, so if you need to replace your keyboard, you're going to need a really, really precision Phillips screwdriver. But we're going to go ahead and just leave the keyboard and touchpad and the rest of the small components on the palm rest. But if you need to replace any of this stuff, it looks like just about everything is just held on by small Phillips head screws. So you'll have easy access to the inside of the assembly. Alright, so their hinge screw layout is a little bit different than I'm used to, so I'm going to go ahead and open the display up and remove these screws with the display open. Most laptops you need to have the LCD in a full open position before the hinges will clear the palm rest once you get ready to separate the two pieces. Okay, so it looks like these little black covers, you can remove those first before you open up the display, and there's a couple more hinge screws hidden underneath. So once you get those two little black covers, then I found the easiest way is to leave one screw in each side while you remove the rest. And then for these last two screws, you need to support the assembly with one hand. So I'm going to put one hand underneath. And this way the weight of the laptop on that last hinge doesn't break anything, because you're supporting it with your hand while you're removing the last screw. Okay, so the hinge screws are out, and I'm going to slowly pull that ribbon through until I can get the assembly into kind of an easier spot to work. And we're gently going to pull those ribbons through the slot in the palm rest. So that is pretty much it for the palm rest assembly. I'm pretty impressed with the Razer blades. Most of the parts are serviceable inside, which is a really nice thing to have. A lot of laptops now use just melted plastic to hold in the keyboard. So if your keyboard goes bad, you usually have to replace the whole assembly. So this modular style, I definitely like. And your power button, it looks like it's just one small Phillips screw that looks like a 1.5. So that is it for the palm rest assembly. Alright, so one of the reasons we don't take apart the displays is most slimline displays are pretty much held together with pretty strong adhesive. So much like like a MacBook screen, you need some special tools and a heat gun and a lot of patience to actually be able to replace the screen or any of the components without breaking something. So if you need a new screen and yours is broken, I would definitely consider replacing it as an assembly, and there should be plenty available on eBay or Amazon. So that is it. That is how you disassemble a Razer Blade RZ09-0288 series gaming laptop. And if this video helped you or you found it informative, please like and subscribe. Thank you.